put forward a lot of ideas, a lot of premises. One being that people are innately violent. Another that there's violence in the world. You can't shelter people from it, children from it. And another that games, movies, literature might be a way of venting that violence, getting it out of your system. All valid points, but I don't see that they actually address the concerns of the parents who are trying to limit access to violence. That they work 100% of the time for all people, that just because there is violence that you have to just accept that just because we can make violent movies, that means that they have to be available to everybody, that there aren't times that certain forms of art are inappropriate for certain audiences, and the legitimate debate that can go forward from that premise as to who gets to decide what the guidelines are for deciding how we can have an intelligent decision, how we can find common ground, how we can sort out fact from fiction. And you started almost, I think, at the very beginning of your audio tape by saying you have no facts to back up your contention, and that you don't believe that the opposing view does either. Well, I've seen studies that say certain things do cause, and I've seen studies that say they don't, so I agree with you there, but that doesn't mean that one side or the other isn't right, or that there isn't some halfway point that needs to be seriously discussed. And so by just taking an adamant stance that these people are narrow-minded and blind to reality kind of is undermined by your own blatant statements about them. And I'm curious if you've thought about that at all and how you'd address that point. I mean, I know that there are 12-year-olds that can handle Kill Bill. The question occurs to me is, should they be? I mean, is it an appropriate film? Maybe for some, but if you get past the violence, which I think some of it is cartoonish, you kind of sugarcoat Uma Thurman's character. She's not just some avenging angel. She's a former assassin and was as bad as the rest of the people she's fighting back against. And while she's a strong character, is she an appropriate role model? What kind of questions does that raise then? I think that the question that needs to be asked isn't so much, is the violence good or bad, or is violence good or bad in film, but what type of violence and what kind of context. You complain about the news and the exposure to like 9/11. I'm not going to get into the government rant because I can see we don't agree on that at all. But putting that aside, news is a reality that we have to face. It's something that happened, that's reported, and that you have to deal with if you want to survive. You can watch a fictional movie, and you can watch good violence. Good being arbitrary here, but appropriate violence in something like a war movie that shows the negative side, an anti-war movie actually, that would show the negative side of war, and that would be violent, but it would have a context and a message. Or you can show an action film that's hyper real, cartoon real, where the actions have no consequences. Or you can watch a movie like this that where it's over the top, it has very in your face consequences. life and death consequences. And so by just, pushing that all aside and saying these people are overreacting, the 12-year-olds know what reality is, yeah, they might know what reality is, but do they understand all the ramifications? Sure, they know that this is make-believe. This isn't a real story. But does it desensitize them to violence? Does it lessen their questioning of whether violence is right or wrong? Does it glorify violence? These are all things that you don't address, and you kind of superficially pass over them like they're not important. Like I said, I'm against censorship. I'm not even comfortable with the rating system because newspapers don't allow movies to get the NC rating to advertise. But I think what you need to do, instead of closing off the discussion the way you did with your audio, is to open the discussion, to ask questions, to put forward your views, but then to ask people to comment on that, to be less demonstrative, less closed on your conclusions, and instead ask, is violence good or bad in film? Is it ever appropriate? Is it something that all audience should be exposed? I've known 22-year-olds who probably shouldn't watch violent movies, and 12-year-olds that would probably have no problem with it. But I've also seen my own family relatives who were allowed their kids to watch R-rated movies, violent movies, coarse movies, and it affected the children. Did it make them more violent? Maybe not, but it changed their attitude. It coarsened their language. It put them through a period where they questioned, and not in a good way. I'm all for kids questioning if it's constructive, if you can focus it into intelligent questioning as opposed to just rebellion. But it really added nothing to their life. It confused them at a time when life is already confusing. So I guess what I'd say is I enjoyed the podcast and hope you do more of them. But while you're ranting, I guess I would say I hope that in the future you can leave it a little more open-ended, that you haven't already drawn your conclusions, or if you have, to at least lay out a realistic opposing view instead of painting it black and white, and the people who are opposed to your point of view as simply cartoon opponents. But I was rating it. I'd still give it 4 or 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I hope you do more, and I hope your new year is off to a great start. Take care.